Well, you know it's a heck of a day when you started drinking in the AM. Hey, Sci-Fi here, and I've got some important announcements at the end of this video. Of course, first you might notice it's a bit of a different set because I moved. This place actually kinda sucks, and I want to move eventually again, but I'm kinda stuck with it. But I did get a new third bookcase.
And there was much rejoicing.
Oh, okay. Fine. Well, let's get to the crux of the video. This is another YouTuber complaining about YouTube kind of video. But there's some new issues that have come to light. Plus I get to talk about ancient Chinese philosophy, so stick around for that? I guess? YouTube is a tyranny! Okay, so anyways, you know from a previous video that I did that YouTube is actually afraid of history. They flag history videos on a regular basis. In fact, the word history is enough to get flagged nowadays. They did this whole push recently after a bunch of mass shootings that they wanted to get a lot of gun content off of the platform, and so they started pushing them away. And it would seem that they're doing that to history content as well. But they want to pretend that they are supportive of edutubers. After all, I just got back from an educon thing that was paid for by them. That would seem that they would have a commitment of some sort. Hopefully not superficial. But you do one subject that has any importance to the real world at all. No, we can't have that. No. It's gotta be about, you know, this is what happened then, and it has nothing to do with now. But that's not what history is, guys. History is the story of us, and the only way we know ourselves is through history. And yet, they are afraid of any serious subject matter. Now some might say, hey, they're just trying to protect us against like another adpocalypse and stop advertisers from fleeing the platform because it showed up on a video that was talking about genocide. But I will point out that a lot of those same advertisers are perfectly willing to show up during, oh, say, the thing that I'm talking about, like a movie or any of those things, during ad breaks on television. They're perfectly willing to show up there. But it's actually up to YouTube to decide where those things are okay and where they're not. But instead of sticking up for us, they're obviously just going to wimp out and choose the route that causes them the least effort. What's been especially annoying recently is that I will upload videos weeks in advance, sometimes months in advance, in the hope that they'll get flagged ahead of time and then get reviewed and remonetized, hopefully, before having to release. That's not happening. Instead, what is commonly happening is that they will demonetize it right as it gets released, therefore snubbing it of all influence it could possibly have right there. And YouTube might pretend that the systems that predict, you know, what's going to show up in search and related videos is completely separate from the advertising system. But if you watch Nerd City at all, you will know that that's a bunch of bull. I just did a collaboration with Will from The Exploration. He ought to have gotten more views than I did, but his video got demonetized and confirmed demonetized, and mine outperformed him quite a bit, even though he has a much more massive channel and a much more massive following. And that's just one small example. It's rife. And when they demonetize a video right off the bat, they destroy its possibility of actually making it any further. For instance, that slavery video that I did a long time ago, it got demonetized initially. Then it got remonetized lacking some sort of confirmed review, and then something like 6 days later it got demonetized again. And that's where I saw the sharp drop in viewership. Because while the systems may be completely separate, they're going after the same thing, and their purpose is the same thing, so of course they have the same results. But I've been trying to deal with this for a while, and, it's annoying, but, you just deal with it, right? Once it gets reviewed and remonetized, everything's good, right? 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 Oh. Yeah. So, apparently they're willing to violate even their own reviews. That's right. You get a nice fancy email saying, hey, it was reviewed and this is monetizable. Nope. Months later, without warning, without telling you that they're doing another review of any sort, they just suddenly pull the rug out from under you, and then it gets demonetized. They don't tell you why, they don't tell you how, they don't even warn you that it has happened. You have to be scrolling through to find this, and suddenly it just says, confirmed by manual review. Even though it had gone through review before and had been reviewed to be monetizable. So, they have proven that they are willing to violate their own reviews. I have had this happen with 3 videos. Here are the emails stating that they are monetizable. I'll put the dates somewhere on there. And here is how they are now. What? I got in contact with a few other history YouTubers, and yeah, we're all facing this same problem. For instance, Mr. Beat had his most successful video have this exact same thing happen. That really undercuts him. Kings and Generals, for instance, has an entire term for it. It's kind of brilliant. He calls it sneak-demonetization. Because essentially, what they're doing is that they approve it for a limited time and then sneakily demonetize it without ever telling you. So, of course, I went to try to contact support, because there's creator emails. Might as well. Plus there's that @Team YouTube thing, which apparently everyone has decided to ignore me, and has decided to ignore me in the past. I had another video that was demonetized, and it says that right there, if you get 1,000 views within a week, it should be reviewed. I got 1,000 views within an hour, and they didn't review it for 2 weeks. So, yet again, they're violating their terms. What did they do when I emailed them? Absolutely nothing. In fact, all they told me is what the review system is. Wonderful. Thanks for referring me to the help page, you human being? It might very well be that they're just using bots, because the incompetence on display here would be astounding if it was a real person. I'm not going to use names here because, they might be real names, but maybe they're not. So I did the same thing with this sneak demonetization thing, trying to find out how I can prevent it from happening in the future, basically. I stated it pretty clearly. 2 emails simply inform me what the yellow $ is, which, I've been on this platform for 5 years. I think I'm a bit in tune with everything. That was just insulting. But then, when I explained it for the second time, word for word, basically quoting myself, what did they do? They acted like I wanted a 3rd review. I didn't want a 3rd review, I didn't want a 2nd review, I didn't want any of this to happen. I just wanted to know what the heck was going on. But instead, they ignored me. Because if they feign ignorance, they can pretend that there isn't a problem with the system. But apparently they can just arbitrarily go against their own word. They can violate their own policy and then just ignore anyone who points out the problem, which seems to be a running problem with YouTube. There's no problem, see no evil, hear no evil, we won't speak at all, so speak no evil is just bound to happen. What the heck? So yeah, what a surprise. YouTube is willing to violate its own policies, and when confronted about it, they just ignore you. Well, this just seems to prove what Hank Green said recently. He said,
"We now live in communities that are not democratic, and we have to figure out how to exert influence on a non-democratically run community, on a community that is, you know, a corporate autocracy."
I mean, think about it. We basically inhabit YouTube while we use it, either to make a living, to enjoy things, to interact, to build a community. It is a space. It is a workplace. It is an entire community. But it is run by a corporation that doesn't have to answer to things like the US Constitution. After all, it's a private entity. So, to further this whole thing, let me show how this is basically a kind of tyranny. A very ancient one. One that was imposed by the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huang. You see, Chinese legalism is a form of Eastern philosophy that tries to propose a system that will enforce the emperor's will through rules. That the emperor basically doesn't have to do anything because he makes an algorithm. It is a method to smooth bureaucracy that controls the levers of power with just the slightest touch. Already sounding kind of like YouTube, right? As one ancient philosopher said, "The Tao of the ruler and ministers is that the ministers labor themselves with tasks while the prince has no task. The prince is relaxed and happy while the ministers bear responsibility for tasks. The ministers use all their intelligence and strength to perform his job satisfactorily, in which the ruler takes no part, but merely waits for the job to be finished. As a result, every task is taken care of. The correct way of government is thus." Basically, make the rules in a way that everyone has to blindly follow them. If the system doesn't work, ignore the problem and blame it on the system rather than its creator. The sovereign manipulates the system subtly behind the scenes, and damns anyone who misinterprets his cryptic intent. So you get where I'm going with this. YouTube's bureaucracy functions basically like Chinese legalism. Something I will point out that this guy tried to revive. So basically, anyone below YouTube's administrative level is wrong, no matter what, in their eyes, all the time. And they control us through that algorithm. You can't escape because there's nowhere else to go. YouTube is basically a monopoly. Its real competition are things like Facebook, which is laughable. So welcome to the new corporate dystopia that we've all been reading in sci-fi books. Except for, we never realized that we were steadily buying into the system the entire time just because the algorithm wants to shape us in a particular way. And if you try to do your own thing, the you in YouTube, well, you're just not going to get any space on the platform.
All around me are familiar faces.
And this is where the announcements come in, because I've had to think about these problems for a while now. First, I've been adding in Amazon affiliate links for any time I reference a book. So if you look in the description of any previous video where I'm referencing a book, you'll see an Amazon affiliate link. I'll get a bit of a kickback if you go and buy the book, or basically anything you buy after clicking that, I'll get a small kickback. It's pretty minuscule, and nobody's really been using it yet. We'll see how that goes. But also along these lines, I'm going to start having sponsorships on the channel. Okay. Yep, I know sponsorships are not popular, but this is the world we live in now. I will try to make them as unobtrusive as possible and use them sparingly. Along with not doing that sneaky thing that a lot of people do where they basically merge it into their content, I won't do that. It's going to be very clear this is the sponsorship. But I will say some of these will be pretty cool, so if you want to check them out, it'll help the channel out and you might get something out of it. So, keep an open mind if you so choose. But because I'm doing these sponsorship things, I feel it's inappropriate to be having my Patreon set up as a per episode basis, since there'll be sponsorships. Plus, I'm going to be putting a lot of episodes together, and I'm kind of starting to move away from having explicitly like, this is a scripted episode and this isn't. So on the more big and well-produced productions, I will continue to have the name callouts specific to tiers on Patreon, but for the ones that are just, slapped together as quickly as possible, like this, then I'll do the full Patreon roll. But I'll switch the entire thing to monthly rather than per episode. That way, I'm not encumbering my patrons. I am deeply, deeply thankful for their support, and I don't want to alienate them by taking on sponsorships and still having the per episode basis. And so I figure this is a good compromise. And finally, we've had a Discord server set up for patrons for a while now. It hasn't gotten a lot of use in the general section, but there is, of course, all the Patreon perks on the corner of it. Those will remain locked to patrons, but the server in general, I am opening up today to all viewers. There will be a link in the description if you want to join. And that's about it. So hopefully somebody hears this whole problem with sneak demonetization. It's kind of astounding that they're trying to manipulate the system in this way, but also it's their system, so technically they can do what they want, but it also explicitly violates their own policies. So let's see if they fix themselves or continue the downward spiral. YouTube is functioning with the same guy who put out the same color of red. It's motto. Ooh, that was bad.